All right, you guys. So the last thing I got to do before I can actually take this thing out on a test drive is I got to mess with the alignment, and I need to set up these coilovers that I've got. Yeah, they are max speeding rods. Get off my nuts. They were cheap and they'll work for right now just to get the car rolling. But first thing I need to do is set up the preload and rod height on all these. Now, preload in some cases is set up by the manufacturer, but in our case, we don't know. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take all the tension off this spring, okay, to where it basically just sits in here and I can freely spin it around. How we're gonna do that is first, we're gonna take this bottom locking nut loose, just like that. We're gonna spin that down a good ways. And then we're gonna take this top nut loose, and we're just gonna turn it until the spring is loose in the strut. All right, so now that our spring is loose in here, we're gonna take and we're gonna hold it up, and then we're gonna tighten this until it's touching the bottom of the spring, like that. And then we're gonna take this bottom locking nut and we're gonna screw it up until it's just touching that. Next, we're gonna take one of our coilover wrenches and we're gonna tighten this top nut until we can fit one of these wrenches in between these two jam nuts. That fits in between there. So now we just tighten that back up and our preload is set. Now, since coilovers have a linear spring rate, that means that the spring is going to behave the same no matter how compressed it is. No matter how much preload you put on here, the spring is not going to act any differently. So it's not going to give you a performance advantage to make these springs really tight or really loose. It's not going to change the way that it affects. But you do want to have some preload on here. You don't want this thing loose in here and clunking around, and you don't want too much preload because then you're going to affect how much suspension travel you have. So about 5 millimeters of preload is plenty for these, okay? All right, so now that our preload is set, now all we got to do is adjust our rod height. So how we do that is we're going to take this bottom locking nut, we're going to loosen it, and we're going to raise it up. So now that we've done that, now we can just turn this. It also helps if you grease these threads with a little bit of PB Blaster or WD-40 or something. Bam. And just like that, rod height is set. All right, now we just got to do the same to the other side. And actually all 4 corners, and we'll be done. Okay, so I was wrong about something. So it does not matter how much preload you put on here. The spring's going to still act the same way. But if you want to really, really, really slam your car, that is where this comes into play. So if you look back there, that is only 5 millimeters of preload, and that strut is or that coilover is basically as slammed as it can go, with the exception of 1 5 millimeter space between these nuts here. But if you wanted to go lower than that, you would need to be able to get more threads into your sleeve here. So what you could do is you could add more preload to this and then adjust it down further, and that might be able to get you an extra 1/2 inch of drop, something like that. So just keep that in mind. I was wrong about that. I've also boogered up these threads. This one is very difficult to turn for some reason, and I'm just going to leave it where it's at and match the same on the other side. All right, we got all 4 wheels on the ground. Now it's time to see if this thing will move, if it can stop. And if I can do that, we're fixing to roll it out there. Let this thing get warmed up so I can finish topping off the coolant. I haven't let it warm up yet because I'm in this unit. So let's see what happens.